Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today, it is January 2nd, 2022. On today's show, we'll be discussing Baylor's wins in both football and men's basketball yesterday. Two top five wins for the Baylor Bears, a 21-7 victory over Ole Miss in the Allstate Sugar Bowl. And then also for them in basketball, a top 10 win on the road against Iowa State, getting, I think it was a 5-point win there. We'll dive into both matchups next. But first, quick word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by our friends from Sonos. Make sure you guys check out Sonos. It is the best, most immersive sound experience right now. I am wearing the Oklahoma State Cowboys shirt. That is because I just got done filming the Oklahoma State video. Baylor's shirt is in the wash, so that is why it's not out for this video. So pardon the shirt that we're wearing. But whole lot to get to. Massive day for Baylor athletics yesterday on Saturday. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube right now, really trying to build that subscriber base. Tell your friends as well. And also, we'll be doing a lot more of separating certain content. So as opposed to putting the Oklahoma State and Baylor reactions together to their games yesterday, we're going to spread that out a little bit more and each give them its own video. And then on podcast form and audio, we will timestamp where we talk about each topic. So that'll be coming up. All right, let's get to the football result first. So yesterday, Baylor wins the Allstate Sugar Bowl, and they do it by a score of 21-7. Now, I know the Matt Corral conversation is going to be a big one, and we'll hit that in a second. But Baylor seemed really prepared in this game. They seemed prepared. Both teams were motivated. I had really talked about this game being special in terms of the Big 12 bowl games because it was a celebration, right? This game was a celebration of two fantastic regular seasons for these programs. This is the first 12 win. I think John Morris said this in the broadcast. First 12 win season for Baylor in program history, I think is what he said. And for Dave Aranda to do that after a 2-win season, to win a New Year's Six bowl game, like, holy cow, man. I mean, what an accomplishment. And this is a program that has, had so much turnover in terms of coaching. I mean, from Art Briles to Jim Grobe to Matt Rule to Dave Aranda, there's been a lot of success mixed in there, but it's difficult with all this turnover. And for Dave Aranda to have such a difficult first season, to make the changes, to get this thing going in the right direction the way he did, this feels like the crowning moment. And I just talked in the Oklahoma State video about their ability to kind of take the mantle as maybe the team in the Big 12 conference. I think Baylor is going to have a lot of say in that now. I think as long as Dave Aranda's there and this team, can build some things like they did this year, they're going to have a chance. I mean, they had such a spectacular group of core players that we came to hear from, but this offense wasn't even that prolific this year, and they won 12 games. Like, there's a lot of things that they could do even better than they did this season and improve. So I know a lot of the conversation, let's just do the Matt Corral thing now. I know a lot of the conversation about this game is, hey, there was no Matt Corral because he got injured, but he threw the interception early. And I think the opt-out conversation to me is one that's it's not super nuanced in the sense of, look, every player's position is different. To me, if I'm in Matt Corral's ear, I love the fact that he wanted to play. He's such a great leader, but he's been banged up all year. And also, he goes for it. Like, Matt Corral has one speed. That's why he threw 6 picks in a game last year. It's also why it's made him a potential Heisman candidate this season. Guy just goes for it. And for after a year where you've been banged up for most of the year, you had a great performance at that Egg Bowl. I love the fact that he wants to finish things out with his teammates. But I think out of all the guys that should have opted out, like, that's the number one dude. That is the guy you look at and you say, just because of the year you've had injury-wise and also what you've given. I mean, they love him. And I talked to Stephen Willis a couple weeks ago, the Locked On Ole Miss podcast host. We previewed that Sugar Bowl. he's revered. He's one of the best to ever play quarterback there. And I don't think, if he opted out, I don't think anybody would say, look, this guy hasn't given us everything. He emptied the tank every game. Luckily, it's only a sprained ankle in this one, but could have been a lot worse. And I do have questions about his durability. Last time, he's not a big guy. He's got a big arm, but he's not a big guy. And last SEC quarterback who had some durability questions, Tua Tagovailoa. I know Miami's had a up and down season. He's played okay recently, but the injury concerns are there. And so I think Matt Corral, that's going to be something that's asked of him because of the way he plays, and NFL teams are going to have to square this. Can you alter the way he attacks? Is it conducive to do that, right? Will you hurt your team if you tell Matt Corral to pull back some? Because he put his head down last night on a run. I forget, exactly when it happened, but there was a run that he had where he put his head down and was trying to gain yardage, and it fired the fans up, fired the crowd up. But man, he just, with the way he goes for it, you have to be concerned about his health. And he's fine. He'll still be a first-round pick, in my opinion. But, if things hold and some crazy story about him doing something awful doesn't come out, hopefully, it seems like everybody loves this guy. He's a great leader. And he's headed for the first round. You got to consider this conversation as we go down the line with other players too. I think guys who are 4th, 5th, 6th round picks, day 2 people, there's a lot more at risk for them. So that's why I think you see a lot of the opt-outs, and it doesn't bother me as much. I've talked about this a bunch, but it does not bother me as much. I don't think it really changes the way I thought about this game. The expectations, I guess, of what would happen kind of slowed down. Baylor just knew that their defense was going to have to win them this game, and it did. Luke Altmaier came in, and look, they had 322 yards of offense, but there was a stretch where it felt like Baylor was in a little bit of trouble. It was right after the touchdown that Ole Miss scored, and Altmaier throws the 37-yard touchdown pass. It feels like momentum shifting. Interception on the next drive. They get in good position to kick a field goal. Ole Miss does. They go all the way down the field to the Baylor 17-yard line, and they miss a 35-yard field goal. That was it wasn't center. It was not even right or left hash. Dead center, and the Kale Nation misses it. And then was the point where it felt like, man, you cannot give this Baylor team. They're going to pounce on mistakes. It's what they've done all season long. They're very opportunistic. They never claim to be the best team at running the football or throwing the football or have the best athletes at wide receiver, best quarterback, great running back at Abram Smith, or a defense that setting records in terms of turnovers, whatever. But they do an awesome job of making you pay. Now, they didn't in the Big 12 championship game as much as it felt like they could have, but they just kind of seem to find ways to put you under their thumb in certain settings. And look, they made Iowa State pay for their mistakes in that game. That was kind of the early example of that. They definitely made Oklahoma pay for their mistakes in that game. They grounded them to a pulp in that one. And all they needed was that slight window, and they go down the field and score 14-7, interception on the next drive from Luke Altmaier. And then they go down the field, only 5 plays, 15 yards, but score another touchdown. And that was all she wrote. And their defense in this game, they racked up 10 sacks. This has been one of the best coached defenses in the entire country. They are tough. They are physical. They tackle well. And this is something that, I still have friends. I was watching the games. I mentioned this yesterday. And they had some comments about the Big 12. People don't watch it like it's 7-on-7. People said that to me yesterday. You have not been paying attention to this league if you think it's 7-on-7. Dave Aranda shows limited emotion always. I don't know. I wouldn't want to, I'm not really sure what his reaction would be when somebody told him, hey, you guys are playing 7-on-7 out there in this league. Watch Baylor football, man. Watch Terrell Bernard. Watch Jalen Petrie. You tell me if that's 7-on-7 out there. Awesome game from Bernard, who had 17 tackles and 2 sacks, across the board. But seeing these guys out there fly around, Bryson Jackson with a pair of sacks as well. And just across the board, they spread out those numbers, but they ended up getting 10 sacks in this game, 7 pass deflections as well. They were active the entire night, and Altmaier or Corral, this would have been a difficult game. Now, Corral makes a lot of plays. He's able to, it's one of his best attributes is his playmaking, but he would have made some mistakes. He definitely would have made some mistakes. And I think Baylor still capitalizes. I picked Ole Miss to win the game, but I really did think, hey, what does it look like with a month to prepare? But once Matt Corral went out, you kind of knew this game was going to be difficult for them. The offense was absolutely horrible for Baylor, generally speaking. Abram Smith played a great game, but because Gary Bohannon was so bad, you didn't have much faith. I mean, they were moving the ball somewhat well, but they end up with 319 yards, I think, of total offense. 319 of total offense. They were pretty decent on third down, 7 of 15. But 7 of 17 passing the ball. And it seemed like, Ole Miss' plan was to get Bohannon as many passing situations as possible. And they were able to have a lot of success when they did. 7 for 17, 40 yards, TD, and an INT. It's a rough night. But Abram Smith caps off what's been a really interesting transition for him from the linebacker position, then going over and playing running back. Still got eligibility left on the table, so we'll see what his future holds for him. But yeah, for him to be this rock that he's been all season long and to come out and be the key for them. I mean, this guy had, a season where he ends up with 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns on the ground. For that to happen for a guy, once again, who started off as a linebacker, feels pretty special once we acknowledge it. And he's one of those key players that Dave Aranda's done a good job coaching up. Jeff Grimes, Eric Mateo's done a great job of the offensive line and getting these guys in positions. I do think the one question moving forward is, what does that quarterback situation look like? What does Baylor believe their future is next season? What do they think that the limit is? This is almost kind of like that Spencer Sanders conversation I just had in the last video I did. Do you think that he can build on what he's done this year, or do you think he was carried by a defense this past season? And do you think the defense is responsible for so much of the success, and that his performance, if the defense ends up being a little bit worse, is not going to be good enough to keep them in kind of a striking distance of being, a really good 9-10 win team next season? That is the question for them, because Blake Shapen had come in certain points and really impressed. Jacob Zeno goes on, but Shapen is recovering from a shoulder injury, which made the decision of who to play in this game a bit easier for Dave Aranda. But what does that look like next season? I think it's an open competition. I think a lot of people around Baylor probably want to see an open competition. And I want to know what you guys think. Let me know what you think. Comment section, obviously. Let me know if you guys think, hey, should it be Shapen? Should it be Bohannon? Should it be an open competition? Do you trust a guy in Gary who won all these games, took care of the football, or you say no in those big moments, the big contests? Your games this season against Oklahoma State, where he had a really poor performance, right? He can't win those kinds of games. The Ole Miss game that we just saw, he's not good enough in those big games. Is that a problem? I didn't think he was that great in the Oklahoma game. Thought he made some right decisions. The Texas game, he had a couple really bad decisions as well. So that's going to be, I think, the number one question for them in terms of offense moving forward. Do they think Shapen gives them another dimension and, early returns say, hey, he might, or do you go with the guy who kind of got you here at this point in Gary Bohannon? So a lot of questions to be answered in that respect next season. But once again, 12-2, Big 12 champions. If it's an expanded playoff, they were definitely going to be in. They beat Ole Miss, who would have been another team that was, in the playoffs. And once again, Matt Corral hurt. But yeah, this was a very deserving team of being in the year 6. And saying this sentence about Baylor right now is crazy and kind of makes me think back about the entire season as a whole. I said at the beginning, I was dead wrong. The only two teams, it felt like Iowa State, Oklahoma was a foregone conclusion. I thought Oklahoma State would be the third team that could push a little bit and maybe up in the apple cart. Baylor was not my radar. I said take the under on wins for Baylor. I thought Dave Aranda was learning how to be a head coach, and I thought, hey, he should have some time. He should have some patience from the fans. But for him to turn this thing around this quickly, and I love the stone cold killer look last night after after he gets the shower, the bath. And it's not like I'm ice cold, I'm this assassin. It's just his demeanor. It's just how Dave Aranda is. And said it all year. He's not going to win you the press conference. He will win you the football games. And I think his results are pretty clear. And now let's consider them a force in the southwest part of the country as they begin to recruit with a Big 12 championship and a Sugar Bowl win in their back pocket. What does that look like? Do things improve? And also, let's see, can they continue to develop talent and elevate guys and put them in positions to succeed? Does this team maximize their ability this year? No, they could have been a one-loss team. I mean, that TCU loss was so crazy, and they got just worked over by Chandler Morris in a really surprising fashion. But this team was pretty close to being a 12-1 football team, and potentially in the college ball, and they are in the college ball playoff, in my opinion, if they are 12-1. Well, probably not because of the way Michigan went through things, but they're in the conversation. They're right there. With the Georgia loss to Alabama, kind of made things a bit more difficult. But you guys obviously see where I'm coming from on this, and for them to cap off the season with this win. Danny Cannell made an interesting point. He said, do we consider them going into next year to be like Iowa State? Are they going to get the Iowa State treatment? I don't know necessarily if that's going to be the case. I think because the bad first season and the good second season and the uncertainty at quarterback, that is going, and obviously they're going to have a couple guys, go to the NFL draft as well, and their defense, a couple studs in that. So we'll see what happens with those things as we move forward. But this feels like it could be, but I'm not totally there yet. I mean, a 2-win season to 12 wins. It's not a question of coaching. It's a question of is the roster good enough to maintain this? I thought Iowa State's roster was good enough to maintain what they had. It was the problem for them was their execution was poor. Their execution in so many different games this year was poor. And Baylor did just enough on that front, including that game against Iowa State, to pile up wins in the way they did. And that's kind of what Iowa State had done in the past. So Baylor might be taking that mantle as that team, but I don't know if I see them coming to 2022 next year the way that I saw Iowa State after that last season. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll hit on the Baylor basketball result. Big win over Iowa State yesterday before we get out of here. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Get Upside. Big 12 fans, this is Josh Neighbors with an incredible app that everyone who buys gas needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. My listeners are making up to 25 cents for every gallon of gas every time they fill up, and boy, in this economy, that would be nice. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now. Use the promo code touchdown or score. Either will work for you guys to get a 25-cent bonus on your gas immediately. It's up to 50 cents cash back every single time you guys go to the pump. Don't pay full price anymore. Once again, touchdown or score, both those things get you up to 50 cents per gallon cash back on your first tank. That's code touchdown or score to get you guys that promo code. All right. So I know we've had a lot of football talk, and football talk will continue, but we did have a top 10 game in basketball yesterday. And what a nice day it was for Baylor in both sports. They go on, they win that Sugar Bowl, and also they get themselves a top 10 victory on the road in Hilton Coliseum, 77-72 over Iowa State. Impressed by Baylor, really impressed by Iowa State. This was the measuring stick game, and not a bad place to be, only 5 points worse than Baylor. The big thing was Baylor's 3-point defense. They were awesome on the perimeter all day long. 1 for 14 from 3 were the Cyclones in this game. Their free throw shooting is what kept them in the game. They went to the line 27 times. They made 21 of them. It's very good for a college team. But the 17 turnovers did not help. Baylor was not clean with the basketball either. So I thought Iowa State's defense came to play, but they were efficient. And Akinjo had a stretch where he was hitting shots in the second half. Flagler had his moments as well. It was just a pretty even scoring performance. 4 Baylor Bears in double figures with Flagler, Akinjo, Sochin, and then also Cryer. So they had contributions across the board from a bunch of guys. Only played 8 players in this game, but those guys did enough. And as we get into conference play, let's see if the grind takes its toll on Baylor. But they have so much championship experience. Even losing Teague, even losing Butler, even losing Mitchell, even losing Vital, you've still got Mayer and Flagler and Chamwa Chachua. And Flo Thamba. And, LJ Cryer was around at least last year too. He witnessed it happening, and his patience has paid off. He's become such a great asset for them. But this thing got interesting late, but I thought it was a great way to kick off the season. It just sucked that it was on ESPNU, and we had, a top 10 matchup. The nice thing is we're going to get plenty more of these in the second half of the season, or the conference season once it really ramps up. I mean, this is a conference that is so loaded top to bottom, but you wonder, how is this going to wear on Iowa State moving forward? Are they going to, not appear fraudulent, I should say, but are there going to be a lot of questions about, hey, was this team a little bit smoke and mirrors in the, in their preseason, I guess you could say, in their non-conference schedule, and get a good test this week. Texas Tech goes to Ames on Wednesday night. So a huge matchup there. And then, as I mentioned, there's huge matchups all season. Kansas, Texas Tech is next weekend. Baylor goes to TCU, who's 10-1 on the year. Iowa State travels to Oklahoma. So much to look forward to in the Big 12 calendar for basketball. This is a nice little appetizer. Second screen experience, I have to admit, it had to be on the second screen. And that was because obviously the Big 12 football games taking place predominantly at the time, Oklahoma State, but was able to watch most of the game. Was impressed by both teams' effort. I'm just curious if there's going to be a game where shots are going down for both teams. Can Baylor score in the way they could score it last year? Because they could spread things out and give it to either three of those guys, and Mitchell, Butler, or T could make something happen off the dribble. And Meyer could do that a little bit too. And also, Flagler. But now you only have a few of those guys, and they're, not as proven, I guess you could say, in bigger spots, even though, once again, they've got some experience at the championship level. What does that look like this year as they go through the conference schedule? And I still think there's a chance Kansas could be the better team when it's all said and done. But right now, Baylor's got that inside track. Unbelievable what they've done, considering what they've lost. And to get a road win like that, to go to Hilton Coliseum, they're off and running. I mean, that's maybe the toughest environment they're going to play in. That was a rocking environment too. Maybe the toughest environment they'll play in all season long. They got the job done. And I think that was impressive, that this team still has that mental fortitude, has those chops. They can do things like shut down Villanova, and they can do things like win on the road, and they can go to Atlantis and win that tournament too with all that stacked field. So they're right back on track. But awesome day for you Baylor Bears fans. Enjoy that, celebrate that, keep that thing rolling. So Baylor gets the win in the Sugar Bowl, and obviously top 10 win in basketball, remains number one in the country. All right, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You can follow me at @JoshNeighbors_. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Also check out a bunch of other videos in the Baylor specific playlist. We'll always put the specific videos there too. As always, my friends, till next time, stay safe.